Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. I might be wrong, but if you've played AoE2 for a reasonable amount of time, I'm guessing you're pretty consistent with what you do in the first few minutes, regardless of which civ you're playing or strategy you're employing. The most basic time-tested opening is generally 6 on sheep to sustain villager production, with then 3 to 4 on wood depending on if you're going scouts, followed by luring a boar, with sometimes a second villager going onto that, and then the next 4 to berries. There's room to play around a bit with the order of those last few, and actually 2 on wood is gaining popularity these days. Little tweaks aside, that generally covers the first 15 or so villagers, and millions of games have opened with players doing essentially that basic economy setup. But in this video, we're going to focus on the civilization exceptions, say where a particular Dark Age bonus can give you an advantage by deviating from that standard plan. A few have radically different starts, and others just small tweaks, and I'm aiming for this video to be a digestible summary of those tricks to know if you're ever going random civ, and could land on any of these. We'll start off with a well-known one for the Britons. They have a bonus for their shepherds to work 25% faster, making them unique for being able to comfortably put just 5 instead of the usual 6 on sheep to start the game, and actually collect, if anything, still slightly more food than usual. Now, of course, you could just leave the regular 6 on sheep. It'll slightly change the timing of when you finish them relative to boar coming in, but isn't the end of the world. The knock-on effect of making this adjustment, though, is it becomes an indirect wood bonus, where you go onto wood 1 villager earlier. Especially given how wood-heavy it is to play archers, that can be pretty nice, as they require a barracks, at least 1 archery range, often 2, a blacksmith, and a gold mining camp. So some extra wood income early really doesn't hurt, and is a little trick to keep in mind. The next trick is for the Spanish, who are in a unique position right from the start of the game thanks to their 30% faster builder bonus. Typically, a house built by 1 villager takes 25 seconds, the exact same time as it takes to train a villager. Because of that, the usual best practice is to have 2 builders on 1 house, ensuring it's up before you get pop capped by the first villager you create. The Spanish 30% faster construction bonus, though, means they take just over 19 seconds to build a house, so you can safely have just 1 villager making a house, and it'll be up before your first villager is out. This is all a long way of saying, as Spanish, you can safely have all 3 starting villagers make their own houses to begin the game, and delay the hassle of having to build the 3rd one for a few extra minutes. It's also technically a little more efficient, as extra builders working together give diminishing returns. You'll still have the wood left over for a lumber camp, and it's just a little trick for Spanish, though is again one you can just safely ignore if you want to play like usual. Third, we come to the Aztecs. Their carry capacity bonus is great for farming, and in Feudal Age is just a solid passive bonus. In Dark Age though, it has a downside to keep in mind, which is that you have to force drop shepherds more often. Your 6 shepherds can hold up to 78 food between them, so while you may have plenty of food collected to queue up the next villager, it's possible it hasn't hit your stockpile yet, and you'll have to step in to keep things running. This is made a little easier these days by the auto drop-off button, which I highly encourage everyone to use. Aztecs have come a long way since they carried 15 food each, and when force dropping was basically mandatory, which was also at a time with much higher latency in the game as well, but even today it's still something to be aware of. Another quick one is the Goths, who, if you land them on random, remember get effectively instant loom. You don't need to do it right at the start and can just sneak it in between a couple of villagers, as it's basically instantaneous and is definitely worth doing before any boar luring. For other civilizations, loom is often delayed because it would put you behind by a villager, but as Goths, there's really no downside on open maps to picking it up early. Similarly, that leads us to the Mayans. They have a very strange opening, being housed to begin the game due to starting with an extra villager. In this case, picking up loom is the first thing you do is recommended, then building a few houses and having a villager chop wood if you like. The main thing is just to start with loom and then be able to move immediately at the town center to making villagers once that's finished. It's not as infamous as the Chinese start, so if anything, it's actually easier to forget the loom opening, and unlike Chinese, you can actually queue up villagers that you then have to remove. If you get Mayans on random, try to start on the right foot and remember loom first. The next civilization, in some ways the opposite, is the Huns, who of course don't make houses, so they just go into sheep immediately. Sometimes you can get away with chopping a little bit of extra wood while waiting for sheep to get into position, but either way isn't a deal breaker. Now back in the day when sheep spawned outside the town center line of sight, you would use those starting villagers to help scout, but most maps are pretty streamlined with your starting sheep these days. Next though, we should talk about the big elephant in the room, the Chinese, who have the infamous 0 food start, but begin with 6 villagers. Older guides about what to do are actually slightly outdated here now, as Chinese are now at 7 out of 15 pop when they begin instead of 7 out of 10, so it's totally unnecessary to build an early house. Instead, the idea is to send all 6 villagers straight to the town center along with a sheep or 2. You then pick up loom when you have a moment, but it's actually something you can delay for a few seconds without any impact. You can also chop a bit of wood if you like, though that isn't essential. And then it's just everyone on sheep and force drop off when you're getting close to 50 food, so you can start queuing a villager. If you watch the sheep closely, that usually happens when it has 43 food left on it as a guideline. That first villager you create then goes on to sheep as well, so you have 7 on sheep for at least a little while, making the food situation somewhat smoother. 6 on sheep actually isn't quite enough to technically sustain production. Alternately, you can lure an early boar or elephant, or push in a deer to really make sure you can catch up on food. If you do it all correctly, you'll be 1 villager up on a typical opponent, turning into a 2 villager lead when your opponent grabs loom. The main thing is just to not split your villagers between sheep and wood right away. You have plenty of wood by not needing early houses. It's food you really need quickly, otherwise you'll lose your entire bonus by idling your town center. Next up, we should talk about the Gurjaras. What's typically considered best practice is to rush down a mill on berries and garrison any herdables you find into that, while the other early villagers go to berries under the town center. This is another case where an early boar or elephant lure can make the food situation a bit easier, and is pretty common as well. You then put your initial wood villagers on straggler trees until you have enough to make a lumber camp. This is a tricky one to just figure out on the fly the first time, but it's really the best way to take advantage of their passive food generation bonus as early as possible. On the topic of early as possible, the next unusual bonus is for the Burgundians. Their first 15 villagers usually follow the basic template, but of course they have the option to grab the mill, camp, and wheelbarrow upgrades and age early at a discount. Wheelbarrow and gold mining are, I'd say, never worth grabbing in Dark Age, and wheelbarrow in particular is just objectively worse than the 3 villagers you can create with that town center time, especially since you'll have basically no farms, which is mainly what wheelbarrow helps. Double bit axe though is intriguing. At the minimum, I would pick it up on the way up to feudal age, and 100% of the time I get it ASAP if I'm fast castling. It does set you back 67 food and some wood, so could theoretically slow your feudal time if you're scout rushing. But 20% more wood gathered throughout Dark Age and on the way up to feudal is a big jump on your opponent. My feeling is to get it the moment your lumber camp is up, but if you try that and genuinely think its cost is slowing you down, then grab it as soon as you can after clicking up. It's just an amazing ecotech at a great price. Shifting gears, another slightly unusual start is the Georgians, who have a mule cart under the town center. There's not too much to say about this one, it's just a free scout and becomes a free lumber camp, but I wanted to mention them. Next, we have the Huns on Nomad. Now Huns are in a slightly awkward position of starting with 100 less wood to offset not needing houses. Normally, that's unequivocally a great deal in the long run, but on Nomad, it creates a potentially catastrophic trap. If you build a dock at the start of the game as you usually would, you won't have the wood to then build a town center, being in fact 50 short, meaning Huns have to forego an early dock. The trade-off is once your town center is up, you get a free horse that can scout, and even collect sheep for you, which is obviously a fair trade, as Huns run the top 10 by performance on Nomad. An unfortunate ripple effect though is that on land Nomad, they're by far number 1 at the moment, as they just get a free scout their opponents don't, without a mismatch in dock numbers to offset it. Now those are the main civilizations I wanted to mention that have something to keep in mind during their openings. Just so you don't think I forgot them, I want to quickly rattle off a few others that should be mentioned, but I didn't think rose to the same level. The first is the Japanese, who, like the Britons going 1 fewer on sheep, in this case I think can go with 1 fewer on wood. Japanese save between 100 and 200 wood in the Dark Age, so at least for the first group of villagers on wood, I've experimented going with 1 fewer than usual, and it seems to work fine. Another interesting one is the Khmer, who can actually skip making a mill entirely. The idea is, unlike other civilizations, you don't need it as a prerequisite building for feudal. So if you're able to get enough food from sheep, boar, and pushing deer, you can then skip the mill entirely, which then takes some pressure off your wood as well, and can lead to some very aggressive rushes. There's then a whole set of civs that I didn't overlook here, but just don't see their Dark Age, or at least first 15 or so villagers, really being that different than usual, despite something that may suggest it. This includes Lithuanians and their extra food. In their case, I still think the regular 6 on sheep and all the standard stuff is the play. Another is the Celts. This is not a Briton sheep situation in my opinion, as 3 villagers getting a 15% boost does not equal 4 villagers. So whatever your usual number on wood, I'd probably stick with that as Celts. Now on the way up to feudal age, you can probably get away with 1 less than usual though. Another case is the Incas, where houses give double the pop space. Technically, you only have to build 1 house to start, and you could just start gathering from sheep with 1 villager a bit earlier, but I personally just make 2 houses anyway and don't really see an advantage in deviating from that. We'll then end on the Romans and Persians, who have a 5% eco boost and faster working town center respectively. Neither are big enough to make an impact on your plan for the first 10 or 15 villagers in my opinion, though that isn't to take away anything from those bonuses in the long run. So that's a rundown or refresher of the multitude of exceptions to the generic Dark Age guides. If you can think of one I overlooked, I'm happy to hear about it. Huge thanks to James, Jared2142, Justin, Samantha, Steven, Woodruff, Vince, and everyone else on Patreon for their support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.